Welcome to Unity Now, the podcast where we discuss unity in the face of division. Inspired by the Unity 2020 plan, we strive to unite Americans by highlighting the middle ground between the two dominant parties and promoting the individual over groups. Each episode, we will bring you exciting, well-informed guests and host nuanced conversations about politically charged subjects. Our goal is to bring an end to the ideological war threatening the collective well-being of this great country.
And please welcome Julie Mastrine to the Unity Now podcast. Hi, Julie. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We're really excited to talk to you today and see what's going on with AllSides and news bias and media bias. So for our audience, tell them what's going on, what you're working on.
Yeah, so I'm the director of marketing and media bias ratings at AllSides. So I've been with AllSides for, I think 5 or 6 years now, primarily working on the problem of media bias. AllSides does a number of things, but that's mostly my wheelhouse. So AllSides has a balanced news feed where we show news from the left, center, and right, and that's based on our media bias ratings of news outlets. So we have a methodology that we use to rate political bias in the news, and that kind of drives our technologies. And my role at AllSides is to basically oversee a lot of the bias rating systems and to get the word out about us. So I created the viral AllSides media bias chart that perhaps your listeners have seen, and if they haven't, they should look it up because it's really interesting and we update it all the time. And then just, spreading the word through content marketing and talking to reporters about what we do.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll share the chart with our audience definitely on the podcast. I'm looking at it. I have it on my screen right now over here. And you started in 2018? Is that correct?
That's when I started at AllSides, but AllSides has actually been around since 2012.
Okay.
We gained a lot of traction during the Trump years. That was, I think, when a lot of people were kind of thinking, what's going on with the press? It's so polarized, right? And awareness of media bias really spiked during that time. So we kind of blew up.
Yeah, it's one thing to highlight. A lot of people highlight the problems, and that's fine, right? And the root cause, but that's what we like to do is highlight not only the problems, but the solutions. And so that's why we wanted to inventory you and see what solutions you guys are working on. So my Jordan Peterson kind of question is why do you guys know the truth about bias with media? How do you know that, right?
Well, it's largely subjective, but we apply an objective process. So our methodologies allow us to make sure that one small group is not determining the bias ratings. So one of our methodologies is to survey Americans. So we do blind bias surveys of people across the political spectrum in America. So liberals, Democrats, conservatives, Republicans, people in the middle, libertarians, everybody. And we send them news content, and we've stripped it of branding. So if someone has a preconceived notion about the bias of a media outlet, that's not a factor. They don't know where the content's coming from. They're just assessing content. So we can get kind of, like an unbiased assessment of bias, right? So we use blind surveys of Americans, and then we also do editorial reviews. And that's a small multi-partisan panel of 6 reviewers, usually 2 left, 2 center, 2 right, who review content. They can see a lot more content than the blind bias surveys allow people to see. And it's not blind, so they know the brand, they see the photos, it's not just content only. So those are our 2 main methodologies. But as far as why AllSides, we think we have the most robust methodology. There are other bias rating systems out there. Some of them are, they use a smaller group of reviewers. They don't survey Americans, so they're not really putting their ratings in the context of how all of America is seeing things. So we think our methodology is much more robust. I also wrote a guide to 16 types of media bias, which is on our website. So we're very transparent about what we're looking for. Like, how does bias manifest? What does it mean to be biased? How do you even break that down? So that
Yeah.
guide goes over things like sensationalism, word choice bias, spin, slant. What does that mean? How do we define that? And then how does that manifest in the press? So we think our methods are the most robust.
And do you look at like all articles from, every news site, or just, like a pretension, 5% of all of them, or how do you look at all? It's so much information to look at. How do you do that, right?
Yeah, we can't look at everything because these are human reviews, right? We're not right now using AI. We hope to develop AI to help in
Mm.
the future, but right now we're doing human reviews and humans are pulling the content, so we can't possibly look at everything. And we look at a large, sample of articles,
Okay.
and that can vary. The blind bias surveys have a smaller sample of articles just to prevent drop off from the survey respondents. We don't want to ask them to read 50 pages of content. But the editorial reviews, we look at much more content, even though it's a smaller team. So we think that's a good balance. And yeah, while we can't look at everything, we are, constantly monitoring the news. Our team is, since we're curating news for the homepage, we're always just looking at these media outlets and getting a sense. We don't rate individual articles. I know there are some systems out there where they're like using AI to give you a rating for the article. That's not something that we do. We give you the rating of the overall news source. So, of course, there can be variation. The New York Times opinion page is rated left by us because we weight their editorial board, but they have a couple of conservative writers. So people still have
Right.
to use critical thinking when they're consuming the news, but we kind of try to give people a general map of what the political bias of a piece from a media outlet might be.
Yeah, I think I saw that the mission is to free people from their filter bubbles, something like that, right? So they can better understand the world and each other. Um, how is that going? Freeing people from those filters.
Well, we think our tools do a really good job and a better job than other tools out there for news consumption. So we just did an analysis of Google News, for instance, and found that 61% of the articles that they were featuring over a 5-day period were from sources we rate as on the left, and only 3% were from the right. So if you're reading Google News to get your media, you are reading in a bubble and you're probably only hearing left perspectives. It's okay to have a left perspective. Our position is that it's okay to have a political bias to be on the left or right. But when we only read inside a news bubble, we can get a really distorted view of the other side because we're only hearing about the other side through a filtered lens. We're not really hearing things out of their mouth, right? So
Right.
we believe that in order for Americans to better understand one another, we have to actually listen to one another. And if we don't, we can really grow to hate the other side and think that they're like terrible and evil because we don't understand where they're coming from. So something we've often said is like, if you can't make an argument from the other side's perspective, you don't really know the issue. And in the words that they
Hmm.
would use, right? Not a caricature, not like some sort of slanted kind of way of presenting their argument. So we're trying to expose Americans to a wide range of views and perspectives so that they can avoid partisan manipulation and actually decide for themselves what they think and hopefully appreciate their neighbors and people in their communities who think differently than them in the process. So we think it's going well, but it's an ongoing project.
Oh, it's yeah. Is it ever going to end, right?
Yeah.
Um, and how is biases changed for a lot of media companies, or are they like, CNN? Has it ever changed, or NBC has it ever changed, or what kind of changes do you see like that?
Yeah, so some outlets rarely change, and then others have changed dramatically. Like Newsweek used to be left, and now they're center, largely because they have new editors who are
Wow.
curating left and right opinions on their opinion page, and they do a pretty good job of that. CNN has changed way back in the past. We had them as center, now we have them as left, but they're undergoing another review by us because they've had leadership changes at the top. So, and we're hearing that they're moving more towards the center again. So we're
Right.
doing some analysis of them. And then recently, actually, we just released a new version of the media bias chart because we moved Axios from center to lean left.
Okay.
And that was due to we were getting tons of feedback. We did a blind survey, we did an editorial review. So yeah, outlets change
Hmm.
all the time. I think the hardest ones for us to rate are like often the ones that are kind of center left. Because we're like, do we put them in the center category or the left? They're like a little bit towing the line. So we recently developed a scale. It's a numerical scale. We call it the bias meter. And that adds a little bit more nuance. So instead of just having a category like left, center, lean right, and right, we also give a number on a scale. So you can kind of see, like, okay, well, they're in the center, but they're on like the right side of center, or they're on the left side of center. And just introducing more nuance to help people understand the reality.
Yeah, I even saw you can see where your bias is, right? You can, for each person you go in. I did that test, and I'm in a center right now.
Yep.
Looks like, and you're like center right. I think it looks like on
I'm
on
yeah,
the center.
I'm rated lean right, sorry, on our website. So we have a tool, Rate Your Bias. That's our
And then
internal tool, or not internal, anyone can take it, tool to see where they
yeah,
land. But there's other tools online that we also encourage people to take. Pew Research Center has a political typology test, um, which we always have everybody on our team take. If you're a new staff member to AllSides, a new hire, we have you take these quizzes so that we know where you stand, and then we're really transparent about it on our team page.
yeah. I think that's important that you show that. You go to the team, you see everybody's bias and where they lean. That helps you tell the truth about what you're doing.
Yeah, and this is another thing that distinguishes us from some other bias ratings companies is they're not super transparent about who they are and
Hmm.
their bias. We've even seen some like new folks coming on the scene who are rating like credibility or misinformation, but they're not transparent about where their perspective is. So this is something that really sets us apart is we're super transparent about where we all stand. And then anytime we do a review, we have equal left, center, and right people looking at the content. So we're getting all those perspectives and just being really transparent.
Does this get you into fact checking at all? Like, with like on Twitter, like fact checking and anything like that, or
We've done a couple of fact checks, like original
okay.
fact checks. We don't do a ton of it. Often what you'll find is that, but we do rate the bias of fact checkers. So like
Oh,
Snopes and there's some other factcheck.org. We have rated the bias of fact checkers because you think that with a fact checker, you're just getting facts. But
right.
that's not always the case either. You're getting a little bit of that spin, or maybe they're emphasizing one fact over another to tilt your view. So even fact checkers can show bias. So for the most part, we're, you know, explaining the bias of media outlets and fact checkers, but we are starting to kind of dip our toe into the world of like misinformation, explaining to you why the left and right might disagree about whether a certain claim is misinformation or not, and just give you all the perspectives on that so that you can decide for yourself.
Yeah, where does Snopes rank? I think that's the main kind of fact check people usually use, right?
Yeah, I think we have them as lean left. It might be
Okay.
left, but oh no, they're lean left. Yeah, so and that's just something that's pretty transparent. Sometimes you'll see in fact checkers that they only fact check the people on the other side, right? So it's like their guys
Right.
are, always telling the truth, so they don't need to be fact checked. We see that on the right as well with right wing fact checkers that they only fact check the claims made on the left. So sometimes it's pretty obvious what the bias is.
Right. Right. And that's why a lot of people don't trust fact checking people like that, and especially, well, when before Twitter would change, things like that.
Yep.
But now, like, our president is being fact checked on Twitter, which is kind of funny when you see that. So that's good to see that everybody gets fact checked. So did you grow up wanting to be, on all sides and media bias and ratings and things like that? Like, surely not, right? What did you originally want to do when you were kind of growing up?
Well, I always, for the most part, I wanted to be a writer. I was always interested in writing. It started out more with fiction, but then, go to college and you're thinking about a career, and it's like, well, there's this whole media industry out there, right? So I
Mm,
joined the media industry as a PR representative for actually a left wing advocacy organization. So I was writing a lot of left-wing content and doing PR. And in order to prepare for my job, I would think, well, what if a conservative reporter calls me? What might they ask about this advocacy campaign? And I would think like a conservative, and I would write it down. So I used to be on the left myself. Think about what a conservative might say and what they might ask, and I'd prepare. And then conservative reporters never called me. And I was like, there's something going on with the media here. Like, most of the reporters seem to already agree with these political campaigns. They're not asking the tough questions. What's going on? So that process actually turned me more to the right, because I was like, well, actually, that's kind of a good point. Just doing this thought exercise. And then in tandem, noticing the issues with the media and noticing a lot of the mainstream outlets were leaning left and kind of agreeing on their political ideology, not really asking those tough questions. So I had a total transformation, and in that role, being a PR representative for a left-wing group. And then I decided I wanted to work on the issue of media bias. I thought people needed to know this, that the media that they're getting is from a political perspective, that there are other perspectives out there, that getting out of your bubble can really help you to think for yourself and decide for yourself what you think. And I just became really passionate about that, and then found AllSides. So there was already, somebody working on it, and I jumped in and got my hands dirty and have been there ever since.
Yeah, isn't it funny how you can look back and see, like, before you got out of the bubble that, like, back then you didn't even know maybe you were inside of a bubble, and now you can see, like, oh yeah, there was definitely a bubble and I was on the right or left, and that's so different on the perspective now, right?
Totally. I was absolutely in a bubble. I never heard different opinions. I never heard different perspectives. Everything I thought was just reinforced by everyone around me and the media I was consuming. And and that can be harmful. I think there are important perspectives I wasn't getting. And this is the case for many Americans, right? Our technologies kind of put us in a bubble, showing you information and content from like-minded people. Some of that's
Right.
natural. We're tribal beings. We want to surround ourselves naturally with people who agree with us, but there can be danger in that too. So we're really in favor of giving people a really broad view so that they can weigh all perspectives, think for themselves, think critically about the different perspectives, and then hopefully understand more and feel like they've come to a conclusion that's really informed.
Right, right. And that's that's what I keep saying on this podcast. Like, I voted for Trump in 2016, and I was definitely in a right bubble here in Indiana. And then around 2017 and 2018, that's kind of when I saw that I was inside a bubble and said, well, I voted for this guy and I believe all this stuff on the right, but well, that's not really helping anything right now. Things are getting worse, not better. And it's like, why happened? And so then I figured out I was in a bubble, and, we found Unity 2020 and got into this podcast. So that makes sense. And I only meet people every now and then that weren't originally in some kind of bubble as they grew up. Usually most people I meet and we meet on this podcast are kind of on one side or the other until at some point that light bulb goes off, and that kind of feels like what your mission is to help people find that light bulb, especially in media bias. And there's so much information we see across the world now. And how do you filter through those and know who's really just telling the truth, who's leaning one way or the other, and who's, hiding something on purpose when they write articles and stories, things like that, right? So it's great to see what you guys do there.
Yeah, and I mean, we live in a democracy, so the way to attain political power in a democracy is to persuade. You want to persuade people to vote for you. You want to persuade people to think a certain way, right? So we are in this very
Right.
persuasive society, and so the media is just saturated with different opinions, and oh, look at that and don't look at that, and consider this but don't consider that, and we're all living in this ecosystem that's just there. It can be very hard to sift through. You hear a lot of Americans today saying, well, I don't even know what's true anymore, because I'm just so oversaturated with information. So we really do try to help people by providing them kind of a map where the information is coming from, what the ideologies might be behind that information. And then also provide a filter, a balanced news feed where they can just know that they're getting the different perspectives. What's important to conservatives today? What's important to liberals today? What are they talking about? And just decide for themselves. So, yeah, and we think that more balanced tools in the media ecosystem would really help. There was even a study that found that people experience less anxiety when they diversify their news a bit. I think our partisan bubbles can really drum up a lot of heightened emotions like anger at the other side and
Yeah.
this sense that they're coming for you or they're going to like tear down something that's valuable to you. And then maybe if you peek into their world, it's not as scary. And you might still disagree. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
But just a little bit more exposure can really soften those edges and improve our relationships.
Yeah. I'm curious where you guys kind of stand with independent news sources. So many, more have been created, since around these years, like from 2016 and 2018. Do you try to I think probably most of them are a center already because of what that's kind of why they're independent now. But do you guys also kind of check their bias as well to double check, or do you focus on the massive, media companies?
Both. We have rated 1,400 media outlets, so that's a lot. And some of
Yeah.
them have been looked at more thoroughly by us than others. Typically, we are doing our really thorough in-depth analysis of the big ones, the ones like on the media bias chart. But yeah, we've assessed the bias of 1,400 outlets. So anytime something new crops up, we're looking at it. I know in the last year we've had like Semaphore cropped up, and then the Free Press, which is Barry Weiss's new outlet. Some others are kind of popping up. So we try to keep an eye on all of those and at least give an initial rating. We'll give an initial like low confidence rating to new outlets or outlets that we haven't had time to like apply our robust methods to. And people can email us as well if we're missing an outlet or they want to know the bias of a media outlet. Our ratings are also for online news. So like if you see our Fox News rating, it's not for cable news Fox. It's for
Okay.
foxnews.com. That's an important distinction because we'll hear people be like, NPR needs to be farther left and this and that. It's like, well, we're looking at their digital news. We're not listening to them. We'd love to expand and expand the ratings and do podcasts and TV news and all of that. But
Yeah.
right now, most of them are just online written news, even YouTube channels. I mean, there's just so much media out there that's coming from a
Right.
perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. How many more words are spoken on TV shows, YouTube shows, and podcasts than are written on articles and websites? Geez, that'd be really hard to focus on.
Yeah. It's a lot. So we do hard work and we do a lot of work just to keep these ratings up to date. And it's fun. We're also, what we've now started doing are media bias audits for news companies. So news companies
Okay.
will hire us and they'll say, we're interested. Our position is that it's fine to be left or right. We actually think it's good that there's liberal media and conservative media.
Right.
We also want there to be unbiased news in the middle, but our position is that unbiased news doesn't really exist. But it is possible to be balanced. So we are now having media companies come to us and say, we want to be more balanced. We want to be more in the middle. Can you audit us for bias? Tell us what
Wow.
your panel and your surveys of Americans say about our news content. And so we'll audit them and give them recommendations and feedback for kind of if they want to be in the middle for neutralizing or balancing out their coverage and ensuring that a conservative looking at it or a liberal looking at it is seeing something balanced and in the middle and not polarizing. So there are increasingly media outlets that are aware of the problem of polarization in the news, and they want to be those outliers that are offering something balanced, maybe something more like we think of traditional journalism that's less advocacy focused and comes from less of an obvious partisan angle.
Wow. So they're coming to you now to check their own ratings. Is that public information or totally confidential? Like kind of the companies that are coming to you, or?
We're working out the process right now. We do plan to publish the ratings. The degree to which we publish our analysis and all the details Um, some of it will probably be proprietary to the client. But we do plan to publish the ratings that are the result of these audits. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be great not only know that you have a rating for that kind of company, but they asked you themselves to audit themselves, right?
Yep.
Because they want to know the truth and tell their customer, their audience about it potentially.
Right. Yeah. And so we're working on like a balanced certification award where media outlets that, go through our methods and our process and are found to be doing a good job of being balanced and in the middle can get certified by us. So, and again, that's not going to be for everybody because it's totally fine to be a liberal or conservative outlet. And we need those actually, especially in a democracy, you actually do need all the different perspectives. But we are finding this increased interest in the problem of partisan media bias and companies that are interested in just not falling in either camp and giving people a balanced view.
Yeah, and something you touched on a second ago is that you put a confidence score in your ratings as well, right? So, like you said, when it's brand new, you put a low confidence score. That's a great thing to highlight as well because that's helping you also tell the truth about your ratings.
Right, yeah. The more methods we've applied and the consistency of the results will result in a higher confidence rating. So if we've applied, 5 blind bias surveys and 4 editorial reviews, and they're all saying over time that the outlet leans left, we're pretty confident in that rating, right? But sometimes we'll have a
Uh-huh.
blind bias survey return a center result, and then the editorial panel says they're lean left, or vice versa, right? So sometimes the methods disagree. That's rare, but it makes sense. They're different methods. And so we have a system for like
Yeah.
averaging out the results, and it can get pretty technical, and the way that we're kind of averaging out the ratings and giving people that nuance.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. And on your website, which is allsides.com, so on the news thing, do you just put all the news from other companies, or do you guys write any articles yourself, or how does that work?
So when you go to our website, you'll see the Balance News feed, and it has two components. The top portion of the page, above the fold, if you will,
Hmm.
has our headline roundups. So that's where we take one news story and we curate three articles from the left, center, and right on that particular news story. So
Hmm.
we'll write a description of the story that's fact-based and objective, and then we'll give you a brief overview of how the media covered it. So that's some original kind of like meta reporting that we do.
Yeah.
And then we also have a blog where we do media bias alerts, and we have people writing about different bridging topics, bringing Americans together to bridge the divide. And we have a lot of partner organizations that are working on that issue, and we host civil dialogue events as well. So yeah, between our blog and then our headline roundups, we are doing some original writing. It's not original news reporting, but it's kind of that meta analysis.
Yeah. That's great to see. So if you want the news, just go to your website, All Sides, right? And everybody
Yeah,
can
we try
see,
to.
like, yeah.
Yeah, we want to be that. The first thing you do when you wake up in the morning and you want to know what's going on in the world is you come to All Sides because we're going to
Yeah.
give you that balanced, objective overview, and we're going to tell you what people on different sides of the spectrum are talking about and pointing out that day, what's important to them. And then it's like kind of your one-stop shop. You don't have to be going to like all these different websites to get a broad view. Your balanced news diet is just contained within All Sides.
Yeah. And then inside all this as well, I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier. You wrote the 14 types of ideological bias as well. Um, as well, can you tell us a little bit about how you came up with those 14 types of that?
Yeah, so the types of media bias are obviously how bias manifests in the press. And we have a left right spectrum, right? So it's kind of two dimensional. But bias is actually really complicated. And sometimes it can be hard to plot on a left right line, right?
Yeah.
So one of the ones that I point out is like if you're a localist versus like a globalist, right? That
Hmm.
informs your politics and how you feel about maybe different policies. What should the scope of government be? Things like that.
Okay.
But you can be a right wing localist or a left wing localist. and you could be a right-wing globalist or a left-wing globalist, right? So that's one of those things where that ideology doesn't totally track on the left-right scale.
Okay.
So when I wrote that piece, it was trying to add nuance to our bias ratings, because it's true, the left-right spectrum doesn't capture all of that, those different uh, segments of political ideological thought. There's a lot going on. I don't know if you've ever taken like a political compass test that plots your political
Mm-hmm.
ideology on a left-right axis, or sorry, on a XY scale, and it adds
Yeah.
in all that nuance. Well, here, economically you're on the right, but socially you're on the left, or vice versa, right? So it can get pretty complicated. Our system is simplifying things for people, but we do like to provide tools that kind of explain all that nuanced information to people as well. So that was the impetus behind writing that piece.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. So what's new? What are you guys working on that's going forward? How can people help you?
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of bias analyses of not only just individual media outlets right now, but news aggregators. So we just did our bias
Hmm.
analysis of Google News, where we applied our bias ratings to tell you if Google News is curating a balanced smattering of news. They're not.
Yeah.
We're
Okay.
going to be doing, we're going to be looking at other news aggregators like Real Clear Politics, The Drudge Report, um, and there's others out there, Yahoo, Apple News. So that's something where, if people are interested in what we do or think that media bias transparency is important, they can donate to us, either a one-time donation or become a sustaining member. So that's a monthly recurring donation that helps us to do our work and to continue conducting this type of research. So that's kind of what people can help us out with. And you can go to our website and just vote on our bias rating. Just tell us if you agree or disagree.
Hmm.
That doesn't determine our ratings, but it can be helpful feedback. If we see a lot of people are disagreeing with a rating, we'll do a deeper review.
That's a good idea there. Do you guys work 100% from donations? Like, how do you pay for all this stuff, right? Because a lot of the media companies are bought essentially from like Pfizer and things like that, like we all see now. Like, that's
Yeah.
important with independent media now, right?
Yeah, so we have the subscriptions and donations services, and then also we have the bias audits that we're doing for media companies. We also have there's a couple of different income streams. Some people like license our technology. We'll create like a balanced news widget that someone can
Oh
embed on
wow.
their website, things like that. So yeah, a couple of different things. We also have like school programs. There's a nonprofit arm of AllSides where we're creating media literacy and civil discourse content that can be used in classrooms. Um, so yeah, the subscriptions, the memberships are a major way the everyday reader can support us and help a lot. But we do have a couple different ways that we're earning revenue.
Is that the classroom learning? Is that in like high school or colleges or both? Or
It, it's mostly middle school through high school.
oh, okay.
Um, yeah, so it's allsidesforschools.org, or is it .com? I'd have to look that up. And we're, I think, transferring things. So, but All Sides for Schools is our, school's nonprofit that has a lot of resources for teachers. So lesson plans and dialogue and debate content to help students facilitate conversations and things like that. Um, so that's something we're really hoping to ramp up this year, are our schools and education programs. Right now, the bulk of what we do is really, for news consumers and, people navigating the press. But we found there was a real big need for this in classrooms because teachers want to be able to teach about civics and current events without being accused of bias themselves. So they need the
Right.
tools to do that. And then also just with our 24/7 media environment and students having smartphones, and they're needing to learn media literacy skills, and that's becoming more important to learn early on. So
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, that is so important now to get to people at a young age because, like you said, they have phones right there and with them, and they can learn about whatever they want to learn. But yeah, teach them about media bias already. Why not?
Yeah, just being able to learn how, information can be manipulated to slant your view, right? Just being aware of it and learning how to think critically and ask questions about the information that's coming in is really important.
Right, because so much of that is about where you live and who your parents are, what you start kind of listening to when you're growing up, and who knows, like your parents might be in a bubble, your whole family might be in that bubble, but they might be where it might depend on where you all live as well, and what your friends think, that kind of thing. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, those bubbles are real, and America's a big place. So, we're just trying to help people understand their neighbors. Um, we think that that's really crucial for improving our relationships and our country. We can better problem solve if we actually understand what other people think instead of just believing some sort of like caricature of them or thinking they're evil or whatever it may be. Just exposing people to different ideas so they can really understand. And again, even if they still disagree, that's fine. Um, but just being able to talk to people, see the common ground.
Right, right. And I think I saw like a few days ago, Twitter removed their news and sports stuff, but then I think they put them back in. Are you guys ever going to do the bias on Twitter news as well?
I started doing a bias analysis of Twitter's what's happening section, which I think is like where
Mm.
they would have like a headline and then a little short blurb about what was going on, and then they'd curate tweets. And I was just noticing personally a lot of bias in that section of Twitter. So I started to collect content to hopefully do a bias analysis. And then Elon Musk bought Twitter, and I was seeing less from the what's happening section. So I'm not sure what's going on with it now, but we've definitely been asked to look at the bias of, social media platforms. That one's tricky because it's personalized content. So
Right.
what I see, it's so fascinating. I was on Twitter, logged in on my personal account, and looked at a Candace Owens tweet, and all the replies were like people agreeing with her. And then I logged
Hmm.
into the AllSides account, which is like less personalized, and looked at the same tweet, and the replies to her that I was being shown were totally different. We did a blog post on this because it's just like,
Whoa.
depending on who Twitter thinks you are, or any of these platforms, they're going to show you totally different content, and and that can really impact your view and the bubble that you're in. So
Hmm.
yeah, there's a lot we could be doing there, and a lot of these social media companies are being charged with bias in terms of who they censor and who they allow, and their terms of all of these things, their content moderation policies. So the time is just very ripe for this sort of analysis and helping people to understand what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Was that situation before Elon bought Twitter or even after?
Yeah, the Candace Owens one was before. I think that was like
Oh,
2020 or so. We wrote a blog, and I was like, oh my gosh, I like took screenshots of both, and I was just being shown totally different replies to her based on which account I was logged in as. And so, yeah, those bubbles are just totally reinforced by tech, and we need to design technologies that get people out of their bubbles uh, so that they can understand the full spectrum of thought. And that's pretty much what we're doing.
yeah. I don't think I've ever heard of that or noticed that on under the replies of any kind of tweet before. That's the first time I've heard about that. That's crazy. Like,
Yeah, you just assume they're showing you like maybe the most popular replies or most liked replies, but it was totally, totally different based on who Twitter thought I
yeah.
was. So,
I guess Facebook does that now, where they show it's like show all responses or just the relevant responses
yep.
or
So
things
they're
like that.
deciding
Like
what's
what's
relevant.
relevant?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So,
yeah,
yeah, and then even with
yeah. How
our
long until? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, even with our Google News analysis we just did, it's like they're like, oh, they responded and they said we don't take political ideology into account, and it's like, well, yeah, but these other metrics could still be surfacing, biased content. So it's interesting how these algorithms work, right?
They actually said that, huh?
Yeah. So and our position, we don't know why the Google News algorithm is just surfacing mostly content from the left. Could be a lot of different reasons. Maybe the left media outlets are just better at marketing or are clicked on more. Maybe it's intentional from Google. Maybe it's, some third thing. Like we can't speak to like why it's happening, but we can just tell you that it is. And then, if Google's interested in solving that problem and interested in providing people with balanced news so that they can help people to get balanced information, they could solve that problem. But right now, it doesn't seem like there's too much interest there.
I mean, yeah, you can't maybe say with what you guys do with all media, but I'll say it. It is. I think it's intentional. Yeah, but
Yeah,
maybe
people have their
maybe I'm
theories.
wrong. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, if you say Google, and that's of course YouTube and all these things, people,
Hmm.
a lot of people independent think they know the truth about Google, but maybe they'll change, or maybe you'll figure it out, or maybe they'll show you their algorithm, and it's like, no, it's on the middle, it's on the center, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, and that's why, we do work every day. We have a team of news editors that are intentionally curating from all sides. We do that very
Yeah,
intentionally because we think that's better for people. And people don't trust when certain things are hidden, right? Um, we've gotten questions about like, well, isn't all sides in danger of spreading misinformation because you're curating from all sides? Shouldn't some information be suppressed if it's wrong? And we just think that's dangerous, and that if it's out there, it's out there. And when you try to
yeah,
suppress, people don't trust the people who are doing the suppression. And so if it's out there, we'll bubble it up. If it bubbles up in the public consciousness, we'll reflect that, but give you all the perspectives on that news story or information so you can decide for yourselves. When the Hunter Biden laptop story broke, media outlets were saying,
hmm.
that's not news. We're not covering that. Right? It's not real, right? It's
Right,
disinformation from Russia. And we were like, it's out there. We're going to cover it. And then it ended up being true.
right.
So there's just a lot of danger in thinking that one entity is like the authority on truth, or what is misinformation and what isn't. So a ministry of truth is not what we are trying to do or not what we endorse. But informational anarchy really isn't
Hmm.
the solution either. There does have to be some kind of filter. So we think our systems and processes are the best solution. We have a balanced team of people on the left, center, and right. We have our balanced newsfeed, our bias ratings, and we're taking a broad range of perspectives into account to just create kind of a better filtering system aggregation service for people.
Yeah, I mean that's the great way to sell it right there. Yeah, because like Fox News, it's really good, and it's correct and left and right, and we tell the truth. No, you don't. All Sides does though, apparently. So
We
yeah,
try.
what is it? Unfiltered or filtered and unbalanced or unbiased, whatever they say, or they used to say.
They say fair, they used to say fair and balanced. So this is
Fair and
another
balanced.
thing.
That's right.
Yeah, you have a lot of media outlets that are purporting to be balanced or objective,
Yeah.
right? They're like, we're not coming from a perspective, we're just giving you the truth. So we take that with a grain of salt, and we actually do our own content analysis to tell you if they're coming from a political perspective. But then there are media outlets that are super transparent about their bias. They're like, we're a conservative outlet, or we're writing from conservative principles, or whatever it may be. And we like that. We thumbs up that. It's like, just tell us what perspective you're coming from and be transparent about it, and then people can know and then assess the information. But the manipulation, hiding things, hiding your agenda, that's where things get pretty dicey, and we try to make that transparent.
Yeah, and that's so that big gray area now between news and facts and opinions is so hard to figure out. So that you guys, I'm sure, help with that now too. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll even give media outlets different ratings for their news and opinion sections if those sections appear very distinct on their website. And sometimes the opinion pages have a different bias than the news pages, and that's fine. The Wall Street Journal, we have their news as center, but their opinion pages are lean right. And
Hmm.
that's fine. But when we're doing our bias analysis, we take care to note if opinion content is labeled as such. CNN is not good at this. When you look at their homepage, you'll click on something and then it's opinion or analysis, but you don't know that until after you've clicked. It's not clearly labeled. And these are, again, just media literacy things that we need to teach people to discern between objective and subjective statements. And when, someone can be writing something that's subjective, but presenting it as objective. So,
Yeah.
just learning the difference is really important. And we try to help people with that.
Yeah. I mean, probably my last question before we end. Do you think, like CNN is still going to be here in 5 years, or are they gonna change and try to get back to the center and just make sure when they're saying it's the news, they're trying to do the facts, and then if it's an opinion, they say that. And I know you guys aren't trying to like kill these companies and stop them, but it seems like the way it's going, like especially when you look at like CNN Plus, that service they tried to launch that ended in like 5 days, that they're having a real rough time, and they are the legacy media companies for a reason. Are these legacy media going to exist in 5 or 10 years?
It's hard to say what'll happen, but we are seeing opinion polls come out that Americans don't trust the news. It's at historic lows, and I think there were 46 countries polled, and America ranked dead last in news trust. So it's a really big problem, and
Jeez.
I think media companies are starting to be aware that they're not trusted. And some of them are asking why, and some of them are asking why and then coming to us. And we can help to parse that out and explain what people are seeing. So it's hard to know who will be around and who won't, but you are seeing these, the splintering. A lot of journalists in the last 5 years have left legacy outlets and started their own startups, and said that bias was part of the reason why. So there's some fracturing happening, but then there's also, CNN's new leadership says we want to kind of pull away from the real partisan content. So we'll see. There are some signs things could be trending in a different direction. But it's also very profitable to kind of pick a tribal audience and then cater to them. So the business models,
Right.
the incentives are also driving the polarization.
I would tend to agree. All right, so people can get a hold of you guys at, like you said, allsides.com, and then on Twitter, I think it's AllSides now, and I think you're at Julie Wrights on Twitter. Is that all right?
Yep, that's all correct.
Okay. Before we go, anything else you'd like to tell the audience, or like you said, go to your website and put in a donation, and put in your email to get the news from you guys. Anything else?
No, I think you covered it. Yeah, we'd love if people visited the site and supported us and subscribed.
All right, Julie with AllSides, thank you so much for joining me, and that's it for now, and we'll see everybody next time.